Hey, mainstream media! Have you heard of an independent movie called What Is a Woman? It seems to be a right-wing movie that goes against one of the many narratives that you like. I was thinking you would make article after article telling people to not go see it. No. It's just an independent movie. Nothing I would get worked up about. I thought you would flip out over it, just like you did with the Joker movie. Anyways, what's your thoughts on The Sound of Freedom? Under no circumstances should anyone ever watch that so-called film. It's a QAnon movie that will empower the right wing. I haven't felt this scared since the Joker movie came out. Do you guys hear that? It's the sound of freedom! And the mainstream media panicking because the public might see something that will make them lose a little bit of their power. Now, I already went over the mainstream media flipping out over the Joker movie in my Incel Villains video. Basically, they couldn't relate to the character of Joker at all because they live in their ivory towers. But they knew the poor could relate to the character, so they flipped out because they thought they might lose some of their power. If you want to hear me talk about this more in depth, check out that video. Now, the Joker movie was an example I used of the mainstream media flipping out for a very long time. But now I have a new example to use, and that's The Sound of Freedom, a movie I've never heard of until the mainstream media started calling it a QAnon movie. And when the mainstream media tells me not to do something, I'm gonna do it, because I'm a rebellious person who fights against the system. First, I'm gonna share my thoughts on the movie, then I'll go over the mainstream media's reaction to it. It has grossed over $127 million, which doesn't sound too good until you realize it only had a budget of $14.5 million. When you consider the fact that almost every movie is bombing at the box office nowadays, it's nothing short of impressive that this movie made so much money. But just because a movie made money, it doesn't mean it's good. Just look at the Barbie movie. Anyways, what do I think about the movie? Well, just like with the Joker movie, I thought it was good, but not as good as most people who love it do. If it wasn't to own the libs, I wouldn't have watched it in the first place, to be honest. The movie manages to tackle one of the most sensitive subject matters in the world in a very mature and restrained way. The action is amazing, and the story flows nicely, but I'm not gonna lie, it is slow in a few places. I kind of wish there was more fighting and explosions, but it did have a small budget, so I understand why it didn't have a lot of those. Also, there's none of those modern Hollywood tropes in it, which is always a plus. They stayed pretty accurate to the true events that happened, unlike the Woman King. Tim Ballard is a cool character. He works for Homeland Security as a person who looks for and arrests child traffickers. And throughout the film, you can certainly tell the toll that this job has taken on his mental health. For all the criminals he puts in prison, he fails to save the victims, because a lot of them are hidden away in other countries or outside of his jurisdiction. But one day he manages to save a victim, a little boy, who begs him to save his sister. So Ballard decides to start a massive sting operation to take down the traffickers, and save hundreds if not thousands of victims. He goes to Colombia, but his partner is getting more and more suspicious of his intentions. So will he be able to save the children, or will the plug be pulled on his operation? I won't say any more about the plot, you gotta go see it for yourself. But please, don't go into the theater expecting to see a massive action movie. It's more of a character-driven drama, if anything. Expect to see a lot of espionage, and the work that goes into collecting the information to put these criminals behind bars. It's really intense to see Ballard having to talk with these horrible traffickers. You can tell he just wants to pound their faces in, but he has to restrain himself because the information that they could give up will save dozens of children. Now, some people have told me they don't want to see this movie because they don't want to witness young kids being subjected to, well, you know. I understand that everyone, well, most people, especially the ones who don't live in Hollywood, don't want to see children being harmed. But don't worry, this is not the kind of movie that EDP would really enjoy. Sure, we do see what the children are subjected to, but it's never done gratuitously or done in an exploitive way. This is not Cuties, it's an actual good movie, and you won't go to hell for seeing it. Do not believe the Rolling Stone when they said it's a stomach-turning experience, fetishizing the torture of child victims and lustering over their lush preludes of their sexual abuse. Rolling Stone gave the movie Cuties a 3-star review, and for Sound of Freedom, well, they didn't even review it at all. Oh, and by the way, RobertandEbert.com gave this movie 2 stars, yet it gave Cuties 4 stars. Speaking of Cuties, the same people who praised that film really hated this movie. So let's go into the mainstream mainstream media's reaction to this film. So you know how I already explained to you why the mainstream media couldn't relate to a character like the Joker? Well, how many people in Hollywood can you think of that have children? And for the ones who do have children, how many of them see their child as the most important thing in the world? Most people who really love this film are also fans of a movie like Taken. It's because they're dads and they have a fantasy about saving their children in a really badass way. But people who don't even have a family or put their career first can't relate to Ballard in the same way as, well, most people can. People who enjoy this movie say things like, "I had no idea the pain and suffering our federal agents go through to keep our children safe. I am so glad that this movie has opened my eyes." But people who don't like the film, like the ones who work in Hollywood, say things like, "The things those men go through, the pain, the suffering, the torment, the agony, all to bring us children, is nothing short of admirable. I just wish they weren't the villains." The mainstream media can't outright say this film is bad for, well, the reasons why they think it's bad, so they'll just do what they can to make people believe it's a far right-leaning movie. Now, do I personally think it's a right-leaning movie? Well, yes. By today's standards, it certainly is. It's not full of woke talking points. But by the standards of the average person, it's not a right-leaning movie at all. The movie is extremely apolitical, aside from the very controversial message, child sex trafficking is bad. But the mainstream media made article after article saying that this was a QAnon movie. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are gonna yell at me in the comments for this, but I still to this day have no idea what QAnon is. Is it like a 4chan board or something? But there's nothing to do with adrenochrome. If you don't know what that is, look it up. And there's not a single QAnon talking point in the movie. A lot of these articles point out that Jim Caviezel, sorry if I pronounce your last name wrong, believes in the whole adrenochrome conspiracy. But he was just the main actor. He wasn't the director, the writer, or even a script editor. And the people who write these articles know that. They're literally using whatever they can to discredit this movie. John Travolta, Tom Cruise, and a bunch of other actors are Scientologists. No one ever said Battlefield Earth was a bad movie because John Travolta's in it and he's a crazy Scientologist. But they do say the movie's bad for a whole bunch of other different reasons. The Rolling Stones said Sound of Freedom is a superhero movie for dads with brainworms. Yeah, I guess dads will like this movie. I don't see how that's a bad thing. I think the best part of this article is when it says Vin Diesel is best known for being tortured to death in Passion of the Christ. It would be like saying Christopher Reeves is best known for playing the guy who flies and wears spandex. Or saying that Robert Downey Jr. is best known for his role as that one guy who got drunk. There's a lot of lines in these articles about how, because of what the actor believes, it's a useful recruitment tool to get people to join QAnon. This is why I really hate the term dog whistling, because if you look hard enough, you can turn anything into a dog whistle. Like, I just reviewed the Barbie movie. That film was shoving feminist propaganda into my face. But if there's a movie that's not full of woke talking points, and one of the actors is right-wing, oh no, it's a dog whistle. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people on the far right who believe crazy things about Hollywood. Now, personally, I believe that Hollywood isn't as guilty as the right thinks they are, but I also don't think they're as innocent as the left thinks they are. But when the mainstream media flips out and makes article after article that are full of nonsensical arguments, I just gotta ask, what are you guys trying to hide? Everyone I have ever met knows that Epstein didn't kill himself. The traffickers in the movie are in South America. It's never mentioned that they're working for Hillary Clinton or anything like that. Like, I wish they were at least subtle about this. Just say it's a great film, but the main actor believes in a few weird QAnon conspiracies. But no, none of them do that. Keep in mind, the Rolling Stone also made an article about cuties, and it has this line in it. Here's what it is not. A salacious bit of pedo bait designed not to appeal to baser instinct, rather than better angles. Yeah, isn't it really weird that the mainstream media really loves the movie Cuties, but really hates this film? Now, Rotten Tomatoes has given this movie a 99% audience score. Wow, that's the same as The Woman King. And at the time of me recording this, it has a 72% critic score. But then I decided to check out the full unfiltered audience score, and it had a 97%. Okay, that's basically the same. However, there's only 7 top critics on Rotten Tomatoes that actually reviewed this movie. And the score they gave it is only at a 29%. Oh, side note, by the way, as I was recording this part of the video, the critics score overall has lowered to 68%. To put this in perspective for you, the Barbie movie had 82 top critics that reviewed it. That's over 11 times more. Now, before you say, well, it's an independent movie, so it's going to get less reviews. I get that, but it's an independent movie that made over $100 million. That's a big deal, and the media should be talking about something like this a lot more. Something like this should be celebrated, but instead it's getting bashed. Now, what I find to be the funniest thing about all of this is that Disney at one point could have released this movie when they bought out Fox, but they shelved it because they never wanted it to see the light of day. Let's not forget about the things that the governor of Florida was accusing Disney of. If they released this film, it would have made them look so good and make the governor look so stupid. But they didn't do that! This is like the best PR tool ever, and Mickey was like, oh, I ain't gonna put this movie in theaters. The main character isn't a woman, so how could it be successful? But Sound of Freedom managed to beat out Disney's Indiana Jones movie in one day. I think Disney is kicking themselves over that big loss of money. Because of Disney doing this, this movie was delayed by 4 or 5 years. Before QAnon was even relevant. Yes, people were starting to know about it in 2018, but this movie was written in 2016. Keep in mind, the movie was already made. Disney wouldn't have lost any money by putting it in theaters. Hell, if they thought it didn't fit their brand, they could have sold off the rights of this movie to someone else. But it wasn't a child, so I guess it was out of their comfort zone to do something like that. The movie Cuties and other films like it push no important messages, but this movie is based on a true story about trying to stop child trafficking. But the mainstream media will push Cuties and not this glorious film. In fact, the media will bash it and do what they can to keep people from seeing it. If that doesn't prove that they are trying to push an agenda, then I don't know what is. Wasn't Hollywood founded because Thomas Edison had a monopoly on the film industry, and the filmmakers wanted to have more freedom over what they created, so they left for California. But now it seems that Hollywood is doing the censoring themselves. The mainstream media seems to not want us to have a discussion about all the tens of thousands of children that are trafficked every single day. There's few things people should agree more on than child trafficking is bad. Or at least I used to think that. I know I'm late to the bandwagon on this topic, but I don't want the discussion about the discourse around this movie to get big for a little bit of time, then disappear like yesterday's news. For a long time now, I felt as if though I was seeing a war between the media and the people. But this is on a new level. It's hard to believe that this is happening, but I'm glad that the media let the mask slip so much this time that we at long last have concrete proof of their intentions. My patron, Bloody Eclipse, wanted me to say, praise the Lamb! Okay, now let's get to the credits.